So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome once more to ELTOC. How is everyone today? I can see there are already 700 people joining us for today's live event. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as I said. So, the first thing to do, of course, is tell us where you're joining us from. So, in the comments in the chat, join in and say hi. Tell us where you're joining from. Good morning, Portugal. Hello, Egypt. Hi, everyone. If you've never come across me before, I'm Sean, and I'm here as one of the hosts of today's event. We have a lovely team there to help and bring ELTOC to you today. So hello, Ricardo from Peru. Hi, Sicily. I can see everybody going zoom up into the chat box. Welcome if you're joining us on Facebook. Welcome if you're joining us on YouTube. And welcome if you're watching us on Twitter. It's interesting to be doing this as a live stream today, so I hope you enjoyed. Hi, Maria. Nice of you to drop in and see ELTOC today. Good morning, Hiker. Good morning, everyone. We are going to kick off with the first session in about 9 minutes. We're here. I'm going to give you a little bit of housekeeping, get everybody settled in, and then we'll get underway with the first session at the top of the hour, which is about 7 minutes away. Our first session, of course, is June and Paul bringing us ideas on professional development. And we have got 3 sessions in this morning's block of ELTOC. So good afternoon into India. Good morning, I think, to Morocco. Hi there. Wow, there's so many different countries coming in. Ecuador has just said hello. Romania's there. Turkey's there. Timor. Wow. It's good. Welcome, everyone. Just before we were going live, actually, we were talking about where would be the hottest place that people would be joining us from today. I think Paul is probably winning at the moment, one of our speakers. But for many people, it is, of course, summer. So when you're telling us where you're from, who's got the hottest place? The UK summer appears to have finished today. We've got a bit of rain going on. But who's got the hottest place? That will be my second warm-up question for you. Let's see if anybody is going to be warmer than Paul, and he'll tell you how hot it is once his session begins today. Okay, I can see that everybody is settling in. We're coming up to almost 800 people watching us live now. And hello to you if you're going to be watching the recording later on. Hi. Sorry you couldn't join us live, but we hope you enjoy the recording as well. 39 degrees. If I remember, Jane was in Italy, as I saw, went through 35, so 34 in Valencia, 36. Don't know where you are, Kat. 45 degrees in Turkmenistan. Wow. I'm certainly grateful for the for the British. I know it's so obviously, Bruno. In some places it is always it is going to be winter, but for many of us it is summer. 37 in Kazakhstan. I like Magdalena's temperature the best. She's 21 degrees with it. So let's get it in. As you're telling us where you're from and the temperatures, keep going. Let's roll on with some housekeeping as we get underway, get closer to those first sessions. So you're joining us for 3 sessions today. You'll see me at some points, and I'm joined by Kolosh, who will be moderating with you as well. We've got a wonderful team of people standing by to help you. So there's Jonathan, and there's Pilar, there's Micah, and there's Katie. So if you've got any questions, anything you want to know, any comments, do drop them into the comment box on the channel you're watching us with. If you're on Facebook and YouTube, you'll come directly into our room so we can see your comments. And on Twitter, we're watching that so we can see and pass and hopefully get you involved as well. All the speakers are going to be asking you to ask questions, to comment on things, so do make use of all those boxes. And as I say, we'll try and get through as many questions. We'll try and put as many comments on the screen as possible, like Tahar there with Oman reaching 50 degrees. 50 degrees? What do you do in 50-degree heat? I'm sure one of the questions that you have will be about certificates, and do we get a certificate for being here today? The answer to which is yes, there will be a certificate, and we'll show you how to get that certificate very shortly. You'll see a link go into the chat box. And if you click that link, you will be able to get a certificate. But more than anything else, that that link that's going to go in the chat box very shortly in the comment box will allow you to get, it's almost like the website handout of the session. So you'll find lots of things, and there you go. If you look now, just appearing in your comments, you will see there is a link there that you can click on. Now if you watch that banner and look closely at what that banner says, the certificate is available until 9 o'clock British summertime on Monday. So if you're watching this live, or if you're watching the recording and it's not yet 9 o'clock in the morning in the UK on Monday morning, then you can click on that link and you can get that certificate. If you are watching the recording after Monday 9 a.m, then I'm afraid the certificate is not available to you. But the important thing, as I said, about that website is it's not just a certificate. It's like the handout. It's an information hub for today's session. So you can find out lots of things about OUP. There'll be some links to some of the talk websites. There's links to some of the material that'll be talked about. And more importantly, there's a place to sign up so you don't miss the next installment of ELTOC. So I do suggest that you click on that link, bookmark it, put it there. And of course, if you're not following OUP on one of their social media channels, if you look at the top of that link, you'll be able to click there. So go join the Facebook group, go subscribe to the YouTube channel, or follow OUP on Twitter. That way you'll always find out what's coming up, when the information is, when the next ELTOC is coming, how you can wait list for those kind of things. As I said, if you want a certificate, then click on that link and you can see it going through the comments on the channel you're on by 9 o'clock on Monday morning. That's 9 o'clock British summertime. And that doesn't matter if you're watching live now or if you're watching the recording, as long as you're watching the recording before the deadline time. As for recordings, I know many of you probably have to go off and teach at some point, or you might not be around for the second session, which is much later in the day because it's aimed, it's more for the Asian time zones. So if you can't see those events live, then of course the great thing about doing these on Facebook and YouTube is the moment that the event is finished, the video is there for you to watch. So everything is being recorded. And you'll be able to almost get access to it immediately. So if you have to go away and come back, you'll either rejoin us or you'll be able to watch the recording link immediately. So just one more time, just to clarify, if you want a certificate, and we will mention it later on, but one more time before we really get underway, you can see now that the team of moderators has put that link in there. If you look at the comment box on your social media channel, it says get your ELTOC certificate and resource pack. That's the word I was looking for, resource pack. So, and if you click on that link, you'll be able to get access to how you get a certificate. But that is only until Monday at 9 a.m. Okay? So Monday at 9 a.m. is the deadline. And again, if you're watching the recording, sorry you couldn't join us live. But if you're watching the recording before that deadline, you can still get a certificate. And if you're watching it afterwards, click on it anyway, because it is a resource pack. And as I said, you'll get access to the resources around ELTOC and be able to join and get information for future OUP events and future ELTOC events. We are a minute away from getting underway. So June and Paul, I can see you're sat there. You're ready to go. Everybody sitting comfortably, got all the snacks you need, ready to go through three sessions this morning. Remember, when we get underway, we will be rolling through the sessions, so we'll be going straight through now for about 3 hours or so. So make sure you're nice and sitting comfortably and ready to go. Do send your comments throughout. We are there with them. We will get as many as we can onto the screen. If you've got questions for the speakers, put them into the comment box on the channel you're on, and we'll do our best to make sure they get to the speakers. But let's get ELTOC underway properly. Our first two speakers are going to be talking about professional development. Always a real pleasure, I think, to work with them. I really enjoy working with both of them, even though I probably make their life a misery through various rehearsals and things like that. But they are both incredible professionals, very knowledgeable people. And your first talk is going to be brought to you by June and Paul. And just to give you a little bit of information, if you've never crossed come across June Lee before. He has taught a variety of students in EFL and ESL, ranging from kindergarten to university students and business professionals. He's held positions as an academic director, a content and curriculum director, and academic advisor in his nearly 20 years of experience in Asia. He's got a great respect for educators and administrators who show passion towards nurturing a learner's path to success. The other person in this first presentation is Paul Woodfall, and he's OUP's Regional Training Coordinator for Central Asia and the Middle East. He has given training workshops from K-12 and university and trained face-to-face and online teachers in so many countries. I'm not going to mention them all. He has lived and worked in the Middle Eastern region for over 20 years, and he's specifically interested in learning by doing. His main goal is to promote a greater understanding of student-centered inquiry learning approaches, with the overall aim of encouraging critical thinking and the development of good study skills at all levels during the educational process. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin ELTOC 2022 June version. Let's bring on June and Paul and hand over to them. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sean, for that introduction. Hi, June. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Paul. It's, once again, thank you, Sean, for the lovely introduction. We want to welcome everyone to our June 2022 ELTOC. Very, very excited to be here with Paul to kick off our conference and our event. As Sean and Paul mentioned, my name is June. I am coming from South Korea. Paul, did you want to greet our audience today?
Yeah, if you were with us a few minutes ago, Sean was asking you about the temperatures. And I must say, I thought I'd be in the hottest, but I'm not. I'm in Dubai, June. It's 41 degrees and very dusty, quite humid in Dubai. But my hat's off to Ahmed Essen in Turkmenistan, where the temperature is 45 degrees. So if you're there, Ahmed, I hope you have some good air conditioning.
No, definitely. Listening to Sean and seeing everyone's responses, even in Dubai, right now in Korea, we just started our monsoon season. So it's been raining pretty hard. It's just sticky, not pleasant, but luckily I do have air conditioning and I'm indoors. It's very, very good to see that everyone is joining us. And before we actually do go into our talk, like Sean said, we want to make sure everyone's very comfortable with our setting. Paul and I do want to support. We were trying to put that talk into ELTOC, and we want to make sure we hear from everyone today. So please, if your fingers are not already warmed up, we want to hear your comments, your responses, your experiences, and your questions in our comment box. So, Paul,
Yes,
do you have a question that you can ask our teachers today?
I do. Quick question. Are you teachers of primary, secondary, or tertiary? Let us know in the comments. What do you teach? Children, teenagers, or older kids in tertiary? Let us know in the comments below. We're here to talk about professional development. We are also here to look at some of the issues around how we improve as teachers. And we're getting some comments in. We've got teenagers, secondary, adults, primary, college. Wow, lots of comments coming in. We'll be addressing your concerns, whether you're a primary teacher, a secondary, or if you have Anastasia, thank you, university kids. I love it. So June, let's begin. What is your definition of professional development? Do you have one?
Well, it's a great question to ask, and I love seeing all these different ranges, especially from all of our attendants today. And I think simply the reason why I like seeing this diverse group of teachers teaching different groups is professional development to me is just self-improvement in my goal of a teacher. Trying to see myself as a better teacher, what I want and what kind of teacher I want to be, and most importantly, trying to get access in doing that. And having this large range from, I saw primary to tertiary to young adults to even adults, I really believe that professional development impacts anyone at any level of experience as well. So I would love to hear from you, Paul. What do you think professional development is?
Well, I would divide it as any type of activity, whether it be formal or informal, in which we as teachers take the opportunity to try something out that is new for us. In other words, to take a bit of a risk and move out of our comfort zone. That does involve a little bit of fear sometimes. Sometimes we can come up with obstacles to our own professional development. We can come up with excuses. And we'll be looking at how we can make very small steps into a larger journey. Right, June?
Definitely. And hopefully, if you can share with us in the comment box what you believe professional development is, or any examples that you've experienced or received or are doing now, that would be great. We would also make sure that we would like to hear from you guys to see that everyone's experience and everyone's idea of professional development, no matter how they're improving or recognizing their abilities and increasing their abilities, is important too. So please share in the chat box, everyone, or in the comment box, what you believe professional development is. And as we're getting those information, those responses back, we can definitely see, Paul, that we have a huge range: college students, teenagers, primary. So it looks like this range is not just coming from one area, but internationally and globally, there is a large range of teachers who are looking for professional development and who are joining us today too.
So we are actually going to be looking at self-directed professional development. When we're not going to ignore that there are opportunities out there for teachers, such as doing the CELTA, the Delta, such as doing an MA or an MPhil, whatever. But we're going to just look at practical steps that you can take every day. As Antonella says, a new approach we can have every day. We're going to look at practical steps that we can take from today onwards. Right, June?
Definitely. And I'm looking at our comments, we can see that other members are sharing their ideas. We have, I think it was Jordana saying professional development is constant development or improvement. Talking about regular updates of your knowledge and methodologies. It's constantly learning. Great to see that comment in as well to it too. And it's really great that we have this strong base, this foundation of what professional development is, and it's why it's needed, and why it is a process of growth and development.
So, shall we begin with self-directed professional development ideas?
Yes, that's actually great. And hopefully we can definitely share what self-directed professional development is. And Paul, if you can give us a little bit of background or a little bit of a definition maybe of what this means.
Let's start with the lesson plan. Now, all of us, whether we're primary, secondary, or tertiary teachers, we have a plan in mind. We have a diagnosis. We have an idea of who the students are previously because we've taught them. If we don't have an idea, then we start a new class with open expectations. But usually, as an ongoing document, the main document that we need to look at is our lesson plan, because it has our objectives, criteria for success. And that document, we can start off by looking at it and thinking, what worked well? What didn't work well? We can share it with a colleague. If you have a colleague that you're close to at work, you can get together and share your lesson plans for a few days and just talk for 10 minutes after you've finished your day. Just have a quick 10 minutes and say, hey, this was my lesson with this group and this is what happened. And just listen to each other. Don't make any comments, judgments. Just listen and allow each other to express your feelings, because that in itself is like a sounding board. It's the ability to actually make sense of what happened. Very often we leave class, we rush to another class, and then we go home after we've taught. So June, my first recommendation is just spend a few minutes reflecting on your lesson plan.
I really do think lesson plans and reflection, I think reflection is actually very, very key. And I think this does go back to our main question of what is self-directed professional development. And reflection is a self-directed step, part of the process. And lesson planning can be and often is a great methodology and approach and a product of what our reflection is. But I can definitely see that many people are sharing their ideas of what self-directed is, reflection, having that plan afterwards, and comparing it, as you mentioned earlier, Paul, with other colleagues and other
Yeah.
people as well to it too. But it's actually that reflection part I think is very, very crucial, guiding us from what self-directed professional development could be. And that is
Could
a
I
good
just
idea.
jump in? Could I just jump in? Rasul Najbour has asked a question in the comments. Is a lesson plan absolutely necessary? I think that's an incredible question, because it's like I want to drive somewhere and I have my Waze or my Google Maps, and I need to have some kind of map. And I think, Rasul, with a lesson plan, that is your map. That is where you're going. You cannot walk into a classroom without having an idea. Now, I think what Rasul is saying is it necessary to write it down? June, what are your thoughts on writing down a lesson plan and spending time developing it?
Well, I first of all, I do agree with you of how the impact of a lesson plan can definitely give us more guidance. How you approach it, either it's written or not, personally, everyone does have their own way of thinking, their own way of processing information. I myself and I'm not good with keeping things on track. I have a very short-term memory, especially working with students that we have many, many classes that we have to worry about different grade levels. Personally, for me, writing things down is just a concrete way of thinking about something. Am I analyzing it? And when I actually put it down, pen to paper, or typing it out onto my digital chart or my calendar itself or my own digital lesson plan itself, it
Yeah,
does definitely give me a clearer sense of the direction I'm going to. So
yeah.
with Razul's question, I do agree that a lesson plan is necessary. Are there other ways of planning and having guidance? I think there are many different ways of doing it too.
There are, but can I just interrupt you?
Of
Going back
course.
to what we were saying about reflection, if you don't have a lesson plan, how can you reflect on what you've delivered? I
Yeah,
think that's the essence there. You need to have some kind of format which you can work with. And when you're reflecting on your teaching, it could be done, as I said, with a colleague, or you could get a small group of teachers together, working on that basis, reflecting on what's good and what could improve in your teaching. And I think I'd like to give a little example here. Like, for example, when we're giving instructions, now this is an area which in the Delta and the Celta, in both, giving instructions is always looked at very closely. How well do we give instructions? And I've often found that that's an area that even experienced teachers can improve upon. Correct, June?
oh, definitely, definitely. I 100% agree with that.
So the way we can reflect on giving instructions is actually to write out the instructions first before we do them, and then see ourselves in retrospect and think, what were the steps? Did it go well? Where was there some confusion? Did I miss a couple of concept checking question opportunities? Did I, etc.? This is where reflection is key, and it's a cycle. It's a really important cycle with self-directed professional development. And the cycle really does begin on reflecting on your current situation, identifying what it is you want to improve, small steps, selecting an option. Now, it could be an option, could be, as we commented earlier, working with a colleague and looking at a specific area that you wish to improve. It could be team teaching. Have you ever team taught, June?
Yeah,
Done team
I've done
teaching?
team teaching before, and also I've been very fortunate to experience all 3 points that you've mentioned. But also going back to a lesson planning, I think everything you said is spot on. Not only giving us guidance, but the reflection, but also it being flexible. And I've seen the word flexibility in our chat or in our comment section
Yeah,
through many
definitely.
of our teachers. It allows us to have that guidance, but allows us to either see where we're going, what worked with us. The keyword that I've learned recently is the word pivot, and trying to see different areas that we can actually make adjustments for. And what the reason why I like this idea of lesson planning is we're talking about lesson planning in the classroom, but the lesson plan also can be done with self-direction of our own professional development. Am I tracking my own goals in this direction of education? Where am my own pathway? Am I lesson planning my own kind of trajectory or my own future areas to it too? So I really do think that this lesson plan idea is not only effective in the classroom, but also how we're mapping our own self-directed professional development careers as well.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. There's a very interesting comment about lesson planning that's just flipped by from Khalil in Morocco. He says, today we're talking about engineering learning outcomes rather than lesson planning. The focus is on learning rather than on teaching. I agree with you, but it's the same thing. In your lesson plan, you are looking at the outcomes, the success criteria that your students will be able to achieve. So it's just a different terminology for the same thing. You student-centered learning needs you as a teacher to have a plan. Anyway, let's move on. What kind of ideas can we give? We've already talked about team teaching. We've already talked about joint project with a colleague. Another one I think is a really interesting idea is a reading group. June, have you ever done a reading group with teachers?
So just to go back before we go into reading groups, I know you mentioned joint teaching and also team teaching, but if you can just share with us some of your experiences or ideas behind these concepts, would be great, because I feel like this type of team reading is actually probably a product or an example of these larger concepts. But it'd be great to hear what that team teaching you referred to meant earlier.
Team teaching, it depends on scheduling and timetabling, etc. But basically the idea is that we get together with a colleague and we observe each other's classes, but in a way that is actually doing. In other words, we're introduced to my colleague Simon, for example, and I walk into Simon's class and say, tomorrow I'll be your teacher. Great to meet you guys. Have a quick chat with them. Simon will walk into my class and say the same. And we will take the classes and we will observe the process of teaching his class or each other's classes, come back and we will talk about what we notice about the dynamics of the class, about the characters in the class, about the flow and the pacing and everything that we notice that we'll make a note of very, very quickly as we're going along in our learning journal. And a learning journal could be, just basically a small notepad, rather like this, small notepad with a pencil or pen. Make quick notes as you're going along and teaching. Student-centered lessons do give opportunities for you to monitor and to be in the background. And when you've finished your lessons, then it's a great opportunity to compare, in this case with Simon, my colleague. And we compare, what do you notice about your groups and what do you notice about my group? And what kind of feedback? And we got in the chat earlier on in the comment, we got something about feedback from students, which again is reflection and very important. So thank you, whoever put that comment in. You can get feedback from your students and you should be asking them for feedback. What did they enjoy doing? What do they feel about the success criteria? How well have they achieved them? But again, it's good to be introspective and to share ideas about your teaching in order to move that step further into the zone of taking risks and stretching yourself. So that was team teaching.
Yes, well, I think that's actually a great setup, and this is just a question that popped into my mind right now as you were explaining that. And hopefully I'm going to address this question to all of our teachers and everyone in our session today. But with that team teaching, I like the way you said that you have either a partner or a colleague come and help make observations. And of course, this can cover from either student management or also class management. But this idea of professional development is going to be more focused on the teaching dynamic and the process itself. So for this idea, since we're talking about how to make professional development work best for us and all of our teachers, I personally get a bit nervous when some other colleague is watching me
Yeah,
or
yeah.
they're not critiquing me. I don't want to say critiquing because it's all constructive. But in your opinion, Paul, and anyone in our comment room as well, what type of mindset do you think you should have? Or how can you prepare for someone else to be observing your class? And what kind of ideas or tips, or how do you? I mean, I'm just anxious thinking about someone watching me. So
I know
what's your
exactly
opinion
what you
about
mean.
that?
The first thing is that both parties must go into it in a constructive, non-judgmental manner, simply recording what happens, and you've got to be open to thinking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So being a little bit self-aware as well to the fact that it's not a personal judgment; it's what I saw. And what I see is what I see. It's you know, you can explain it in your way, but I'm not actually judging you as a teacher. You're my colleague, and please tell me what you saw as well. I was interested in the comments. There's a long comment from Calms RT, who says that she team teaches, I believe it's a she team teaches with another colleague every Monday. We talk about how the children have progressed and how we could help those. Here it is. How we could help those who are slower in the classes. Um, Communication is essential here so that instructions and lesson flow would not be a conflict. And I think that, you know, that's also really important because team teaching involves a certain amount of administration. But going back to what you were saying, June, be open to, but do not give judgmental criticism as such. The key is observing what happens, not making a judgment on what happens.
That's actually great. To be honest, that's actually, I know we are all working adult professionals, but I have in my past done, I have experienced team teaching before. And there are many teachers who are very passionate and dedicated. And I oftentimes take, comments even at a professional level, a little bit personally. But I think it's great how you mentioned that mindset of just being there, being self-aware. There isn't a perfect teacher out there, and many of our comments are saying that it's that feedback is also very important. And I like how you mentioned
Indeed.
that student feedback as well, because in my opinion, if a student is able to see even the teachers are getting feedback to each other, that actually opens a lot of possibilities for when they get feedback from their teacher, that they're also realizing that teachers are communicating with each other, that development and growth is also there at the teacher level. And it's
Right.
actually very
Yeah.
easier to make that transition to give students feedback because they can recognize even their teacher is doing that same process as well.
I do think even if you're a very shy introvert, and many teachers, by the way, are introverts, but they like to have a controlled scenario where they're in control and they're in their class. If you're an introvert like that, keeping a teaching log or a reflective journal, you don't have to share it with anybody, but just keeping a reflective journal is also a very good way of catching opportunities for professional development. Noticing things immediately after the lesson finishes, just making a note, that didn't work. Why? And then maybe on your way home afterwards, it'll come to your mind, and I go back to instructions again. Maybe there was something there that I forgot to give. Why did 3 groups out of 4 immediately get down to the task, and the 4th group was still arguing who's doing what? Does that tell me something? It does, because I need to assign roles and make sure that my students, okay, next time, so in my journal, I write, next time, assign roles, because not all my students are able to organize themselves efficiently. So I assign roles to groups, and then we understand how to organize the activity. Those kind of things. Reflective journal, really key. Very important.
I also agree with you with that. And many of our teachers are actually stating that this reflective journal idea is a way for us to kind of keep tabs on our own kind of progress in the classroom and outside. And like you said earlier, if this is great for not just introverts, but anyone else. And there are a lot of different ways of doing this. I mean, you and I are both a bit more old fashioned. We're both a bit more pen and paper, which is totally fine.
Pencil
You
in
can
my case.
Oh, pencil, even more old fashioned. But you can also do this. And I've done this in the classroom. I've just written self notes on the whiteboard, just giving
Yeah.
myself a little bit of note here and there. I'm not
Yep.
specifically calling anything out, but it's just the way I approach that in the classroom. And what I've seen other teachers do, and they actually record themselves after class on their mobiles. They leave
Yep.
little message recordings to themselves, only because they may not have time to record everything down in their journal in between two lessons or two class periods. But it's just quicker. They can hear it back again. It saves paper. It keeps everything all tracked
Yep.
with you. It's mobile, and that
It's a
idea,
great
that
idea.
journal log, is actually great. But that
Yeah.
self-recording is also a good possibility for more of our high-tech um, advanced teachers out there who want to carry all that stuff with them, or the idea that the reflection is important, so you can self-evaluate, look back, see adjustments, make those adjustments, and it all leads to much more growth professionally as a teacher, but not just impacting the classroom itself to its too.
I would also recommend either reading a blog, a teacher's blog. There are many out there. Or, in fact, writing your own blog about teaching. I have a couple of favorite blogs I like to read now and then. Um, and, of course, social media, actively taking part in discussions. I believe in where you are, June, you have a kind of a social media network. Is that right?
Yes, I really like the way how you mentioned not only reading blogs, but just writing your own or just getting something out there. In
Yeah.
Korea, the teaching community is fierce. We have a very,
Wow.
very strong teaching community. And within the teaching community, they have their own, it's like their own blog site. So all these teachers report on what they've shared. It's an open community, which is great to get any kind of information. You can pick and choose for those who are just lurkers, who just want to go in and kind of select things on their own. If you want to participate, I'm pretty sure even with our ELTOCs, I've seen myself screen captured from a previous ELTOC uploaded on that open
Really?
community sites from the
Yeah.
past. And they share everything, they share tips. And this is just a great approach for those people who
That
don't know where to go
excellent.
to. Yeah, and that
Yeah.
blog links everything to that. It's great that you brought that up.
Indeed, I could also bring up that we ourselves at OUP, we have wonderful resources that um, you can freely access at any time, and we'll be putting the links up very shortly to our resources. We have blogs at OUP ELT Global is a blog. We have blog posts that come out regularly. We also have social media, and of course we have our professional development modules, but we'll put them up. Yes. So you should be getting those in the comment, a URL, the link to the professional development modules. They're very practical, very simple. Take you about 20 minutes to an hour, depending on how much time you want to spend doing them. But they're designed to be bite-sized learning. You've written some, June. I've written as well. What would you say about the professional development modules?
To be honest, now that you mentioned it, I mean, if we, and like you said earlier, it's not just blogs, but there are so many different areas and outlets that independent teachers can find on their own. And as you can see on the screen right now, this is just one of the services that OUP provides, but there are
Yeah.
so many other areas and so many other resources that are available for those teachers who are independently looking for this. And to be honest, just joining in a community like ELTOC and OUP's blog community, it's going to link you up to something else. And the best part of self-directed is that you're choosing the PD that works best for you. So
Indeed.
it's a very, very important thing that we have this. And if you can show also our research papers. So these are all areas that you can actually just get expert advice on any topics. This is on a position paper on global skills, but there are a lot of resources out there. And for those teachers who are struggling, trying to find and trying to do the research themselves, you don't need to do it by yourself. We have it done already for you. Literally, you just have to click and download, and all the type of PD support is there for you.
One of the great things about the position papers is that they're very in depth, but we also offer toolkits for you to put the ideas into practice. So you read a position paper of 30 pages PDF. It's got lots of bibliography, further reading for you, but also you'll receive a toolkit once you've registered and received your position paper. You'll receive a toolkit which you can use in your classes, whether you be primary, secondary, or a tertiary teacher.
Definitely. And yeah, I just like, even if in this short amount of time that we've had together, we've hit so many different areas, and I'm just now realizing that I've been focusing a lot on our comment section, but we actually have some great questions lined up
We do.
for us too, Paul.
Yep,
we have a lot of good questions. So
yeah,
if it's okay with you, Paul, I would love to be address some of these questions.
Sure,
if it's okay.
sure. Could we start with Abdurrahman, who says, June, what kind of notes do you usually write on the board for yourself in your lessons?
Well, thank you for sharing. That's a great question. And in the past, when I've used with with primary and secondary, these are just basic notes to myself. It's all about that planning idea. So it's not just in the classroom. I write notes to myself as like in certain areas that I'm going to think that this project time I gave, not enough explanation. So I'll just put a little initials to myself. I'll put C, instructions, meaning clearer instructions or better explicit instructions, or I'll just put a little clock. And that means I should have given them more time to develop this or to flesh everything out in the classroom. So they don't have to be full, complete sentences or paragraphs. They're just little notes to yourself. And like I said earlier, I'm horrible without tracking things. So I'm a visual learner and visual note taker.
You probably take a photograph with your camera at the end of the lesson.
Yeah, that's what actually I do. I actually do
I
that.
thought so.
Yeah, so I'll put two or three different comments up there. Need more time, need to have better directions, or respond better, or add some more reflection time. So there's this really, really short comments to myself to keep on track for later sessions. But once again, that's not just for one session. It's the whole idea of that growth of developing that correct and more suitable lesson for that class. So thank you for that question. That's a great question.
Not at all.
We have another question.
Yes,
if it's okay,
ahead,
Paul.
Jude.
It's from Deepika.
Yep.
She asks, or they ask, what would be good questions to guide our reflection journals?
Okay, that's an excellent question in itself. When you reflect on a class that you've just given, a question could be a simple one, such as, why does little Johnny never sit down? If you're a primary school teacher, just write that question. Ask yourself. You've had little Johnny in this new class for 2 weeks, and you've noticed that little Johnny is very disruptive and very difficult. In the first couple of lessons, you could just write in your journal, why is he unable to sit down? Now, that may cause you to do several things. It may cause you to consider little Johnny in the lesson plan for the next lesson. It may cause you to give him some kind of monitoring role, give him the crayons to give out to, give him a responsible role in the class, and maybe that'll keep little Johnny much more focused on what he's doing. So that's one example in primary of a question that your reflective journal could have. Another thing could be on writing. If you're at university and you're doing a process writing approach to essays, and you may ask yourself the question, I still cannot find a clear way of teaching main idea and support. So you would write your question in your reflective journal. How can I make the main idea and support more visible for my students? They're struggling. They mix up secondary ideas with main ideas. They put in examples without any main idea. I'm having a problem. So you write main idea, question mark, support, example, question mark, and you allow yourself to just go to sleep, dream about it, maybe not, but leave it, let it settle in the back of your mind, and you will then come across, a couple of days later, without a doubt, you'll come across an idea that will work for you. That is the purpose of learning journals. You may wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and think, Good Lord. And open your learning journal and write a couple of notes. I'm going to do it differently this time. I'm going to give them some examples and ask them whether they can develop a main idea from the examples. Usually it's the other way around. I ask them, here's the main idea, tell me some examples, and they don't have any. So this time I'm going to give them some examples. Let's do it the other way around, see if that works better. That kind of thing. Any Deepika, any question is valid for you.
And just to go on top of that too, just to follow up with that, I think it's also areas that I need to work upon. Like you said, if you're not comfortable with that essay structure yet, I'll put in my reflective journal, June, brush up on your reflexive pronoun teaching. So I have to actually go back and I'll teach myself how to do reflexive pronouns again. Or if the paragraph writing is difficult, and just put down, find areas that's for support of writing, or how can I work with pronunciation or fluency better? So these are all notes to yourself, not just in the classroom, but ideas for yourself and areas that you recognize that, you know what, I could use a little bit more support. I need a little bit more self-training. I need to do a little bit more homework on my own as well. And these are all great ideas for that journal.
Exactly. I can go to a professional development module and have a look at writing or, excuse me, using technology in the classroom. Whatever it is, the resources are out there. I think the main thing is the motivation to want to do it and to keep asking questions. I believe we've got another. Nuruddin Menyani says, how can one sustain developing professionally? Nuruddin, I think it's a mindset, really. It's just I want to go further. I want to feel that I am achieving more every day, rather than, oh, I've got another class to teach. I think, it's a mindset, isn't it?
Yes,
we're running out of time, but
yes, and like I read this exact same question as well. I'm glad that you touched upon this, and I think we only have a few minutes left in our session, but this is a great question to be ending on. That I 100% agree with you, Paul. It is a mindset. Like I said earlier, and like we agreed earlier, that the professional development is a track and process that best fits you, depending on your situation, your teaching environment. People say, is there a difference between freelancing or being in an institution? Some of your resources may be different. Maybe the approach may be different, but the idea is that we always have that mindset of improving ourselves, being better, because, and I believe Paul can agree with this, like, to be honest, our focus is not just our personal growth, but we're impacting a whole set of students and learners in the future. And it's whatever we do best for ourselves is only going to impact them beneficially as well to it too. So keeping that in mind, that your learners are the reason why we have this profession, is my motivating driving force to become a better teacher.
Yeah, indeed. I think the personal motive, if it improves, if this, by doing this, makes me a better person, then I'm going to have a huge effect on other people. So thanks, Nuruddin, for that lovely last question. We are coming up to, I think we've got about a minute left, June. How would we sum up this 40 minutes? It's gone by so quickly. How would you sum it up?
I would sum it up as amazing. I just love having this conversation. And like I said earlier, talk back into ELTOC, and I appreciate everyone's ideas, comments. All of it just makes me motivated, seeing so many interested and teachers participating in our events. How about you, Paul? How do you feel about this?
Well, I mean, we did mention technology just a minute during the discussion, and I'd like to remind everyone that coming up, the next session, you have Jenny Dance and Chris Farrell talking about using technology effectively in your classroom. So enjoy that, because I'm sure you'll get some tips. But I think that's it. We've run out of time, June. Thanks so much. It's been great.
Yes, lovely working with you, Paul. And it's great to see everyone here today. Please continue to stay with our ELTOC sessions. Once again, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
It's always a pleasure with you, June.
You too, Paul.
Stay well.
Well, great. Thank you very much, June and Paul, for this very lively and lovely kickoff to today's ELTOC sessions. I completely agree that professional development is a very, very vast area. And as we are all professionals, it's really important to keep an eye on, how we can improve. And it's also very important to have this kind of self-reflection. I can totally agree with you. So it's not something that should be, imposed on us. This is something we can actually make it work for ourselves. I can guess you can say that. Peer observation, I think it's very, very important. There's such a, lot of things we can learn from each other. And so ELTOC is actually a good opportunity for professionals to come together, share our thoughts and questions. So once again, let me just thank you, June and Paul, and also thanks to the lovely questions. Thanks to the lovely audience for the lovely questions. Please keep them coming as we go on. And as we have mentioned before, we've got Chris and Jenny coming up in a few minutes. And so this might be a good time for a couple of minutes to maybe take a break, stretch, and get a drink or something like that. Stay tuned with us. And if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat box. Also, if you would like to find out more about the certificates and the recordings, there is a link in the description. And thank you for popping that up on the screen. So this is what you actually have to know about your ELTOC certificate. Wow, we've got more than 1,000 people joining us on Facebook and YouTube. We're also live on Twitter. So hopefully you'll keep those comments coming, and we will just go on and follow on with ELTOC. Luckily, ELTOC is now not just an annual event, but we can have more episodes. And this is the June 2022 episode of ELTOC, now live on Facebook and YouTube. And hopefully this is a good way for your daily professional development needs, because obviously it's very important to get these, kind of practical bits of information when we can come together and discuss everything basically that relates to our everyday lives as a teacher. So yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity. It's so great to have everybody with Oxford University Press at ELTOC. And if you have just joined the live stream, let me just give you a brief update. My name is Kolosh. I work as a teacher trainer and educational consultant for Oxford University Press. I've just taken over from Sean, who's also the lead moderator for this event. And let me just say thank you to all the lovely people behind the scenes who are making sure that we've got a smooth live stream experience. So we've got my lovely colleagues working on the chat box comments, and also, putting up all the links. So hopefully we've got you covered for today's session. Right, I think we have Chris and Jenny waiting behind the scenes. So let me just very quickly say a few words about them. And thank you for joining us today. It's lovely to see you both. So Chris Farrell is Head of Training and Development with the Centre of English Studies, and he's a member of the Board of Trustees of Equals, and he chairs the English UK Teacher Development Advisory Group. He's a guest lecturer at UCD, which is University College Dublin, and has written and delivered online courses for Nile and Trinity College London. So welcome, Chris. Glad to have you here today. And welcome to Jenny Dance. Actually, Jenny has recently delivered a very, very nice live stream on pronunciation on Facebook and YouTube. So maybe many of you have already met her before. But if not, let me just give a brief introduction. So Jenny is an English teacher and exam trainer with more than 20 years ELT experience. And she has a passion for pronunciation, teaching, and learning, and is also the founder of Phona, which is a publisher of the award-winning Say It English pronunciation app. Jenny is a regular contributor and presenter on the Learning English with Oxford social channels, and she believes using technology to support language learning can be both effective and fun for learners and teachers. Am I right there?
Yes, fun.
So,
Effective and fun.
Chris and Jenny, how are you today?
Super. That's beautiful
Oh, wow.
introduction. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Great.
thank you, Carlos. Yeah.
And that was a fascinating session to watch beforehand. Really, really interesting. Great interaction, good comments. Very, very interesting.
Okay. So let me just give the floor to you now, and off you go. Thank you.
Great.
So, no pressure, Jenny.
know.
We're
Here we
going to be
are.
talking today about technology and the utilization in the classroom. And what we're going to try to offer in our conversation is some practical tips from you as a teacher, or if you're academic management or whatever you might happen to be in. But mainly what we're trying to do is start this conversation with you guys involved about some of your concerns. Hello. Some of your concerns and some of the probing questions that you might have. Obviously, we've only got kind of a limited time, but we will do our best. So, Jenny, do you want to start off?
Yeah, exactly. So what Chris and I want to do really, as he said, is we want to open up this conversation. And what we've done is we've structured the way that we want to run this short session with some kind of questions to just lead off, elicit some ideas. We are interested in your questions, but also your contributions to hear about how you're using technology in the classroom, not just the challenges, but the successes as well, right? What works, what do your students enjoy? And so we've got sort of 3 or 4 sections, which we're going to talk through, but we would love to hear your thoughts on these questions and topics as well. So I think the first one we have, actually, I think we have a kind of a poll because we want to get a feel for how you guys are using technology in the classroom. Chris.
Yeah, that was a lot of my head there.
Okay, so this is better. So now you should all be able to see this simple question to kickstart. How often do you use technology in the classroom? Great. We've got some answers coming in already. Every lesson is number 1. I'm seeing quite a few. Number 1, most lessons number 2. Brilliant. And then we have not very often or never 3 and 4. There may be reasons why you can't use technology very often. There may be some technical challenges or hardware challenges or behavior challenges. And again, this is the kind of thing that we want to talk about. But great. I think
so.
a lot of people.
A lot of number 1s and 2s, and what's quite interesting is one of the things we want to look at as well is effective use. So you know, are we using technology as a replacement for something which can be done on paper, or are we using technology to actually improve students' lives? So it's really, there's lots of tech users. It's mostly 1s and 2s, which is fascinating.
Good, isn't it, to see?
Fascinating
So then,
to see.
I agree with you, Chris, absolutely. The immediate next question, and this is what we really want to get into in this session, is about using technology effectively and understanding how you can evaluate whether you're able to use that technology effectively, and then sharing some tips on how, you know, some of us are doing that and what you could consider. So this is, I agree. I mean, all of the answers I can see coming in, people are answering in that top half of the answer. So you're all using technology a lot. So shall we get into the next question? If we can one up.
Well, a couple of things that, you know, I would like to dig in, and obviously we've got a big group here. I would like to see what type of technology we can look at that, or people can comment. And also, somebody was talking about, we teach on Moodle. In some institutions, maybe they have to utilize technology, and that might not be in the best interests, or you know, the teacher might not like that. So, you know, technology is not always a positive thing.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
Judicious use of technology can be, but we have to be careful.
It needs management. You can't just sort of fill a classroom with phones and iPads and go, brilliant, we're using technology and isn't it all fantastic? But I agree that, you know, when you can get it to work for you, it should be doing this upgrading, doing some of the heavy lifting, doing, enhancing engagement, things like that.
Yeah.
Do we have a question header for our first?
Question one. The first section we're going to look at is technology and the teacher. So I think the first question, if we have a banner, is what is technology in the classroom? So when we're talking about technology in the classroom, what do we actually mean? And maybe for you, Jenny, what would be your definition of technology in the classroom? What would you be looking at for that?
I mean, I appreciate it really depends on where you are. As you mentioned, Chris, what maybe your organization, your school is requesting for you to use, what kind of access you have. But for me, when I'm in the classroom with students, probably quite fortunate where we are. We have Wi-Fi access, and we have generally all the students will have a phone. Mm-hmm. So it's smartphones. It is also definitely iPads. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then actually, it may feel a bit old-fashioned compared to an iPad, but the interactive whiteboard, which I'm a big fan of, interactive whiteboards, I think, just because they put everything in a big format and everybody's looking at the same screen for a bit, I find that really effective.
Yeah.
So I can see that there are lots of people responding to this question, what type of technology they're using.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a vast array of different things we're looking at. There's obviously software and hardware. We have to look at interactive whiteboard there. I think like we can often dismiss things like IWBs or even overhead projectors as being very old-fashioned, but it depends on how they're utilized.
How they're utilized
in the classroom. So for example, all of these things that require electricity or battery powers are technology in the classroom. It's just the utilization and how they're actually particularly brought into the classroom. I know a lot of people are looking at software there, apps and platforms and different things like that, and that's that would be what most teachers would be looking at in terms of utilization of technology, that BYOB and things like that. And that obviously all depends on your competency in use of these different platforms, the connectivity in the school, promotion of learner independence strategies, and utilization different technology. So I think our definition of technology doesn't have to be just Kahoot, or it doesn't have to be just IWB. It can be a wide spectrum of things, but it's what works in your context, what works for your students, and what doesn't create a digital divide where some students are left behind by their limited access or knowledge of technology.
It does. It's very situational, isn't it? And then you've also got the, as you say, the constraints of whatever the school are asking you to use. I mean, I think I don't have a massive experience of working with the digital platforms. I've been more inclined to be able to kind of hand select apps or bits of content and use or kind of get the students to use their own devices, which can be good. Although I did already see somebody putting a comment saying I had to stop students bringing smartphones into the classroom because they were playing games. And this is something that I would like to for people to sort of share some tips and best practices on. So this is not digital, but it's associated with digital. I was in a classroom recently, and I think this is probably quite common now, where every student comes in and they put their smartphone in a pocket. So there was a sort of a big piece of fabric with 30 pockets. And at the point where I needed them to be able to use their smartphones, they were allowed to go and get them, use them for the session that we had, where they needed to use their own devices, and then put them back in the pockets. So that management of the interaction with the personal device is definitely
and that also helps us with the blending of synchronous and asynchronous learning, because what we're really looking at is being able to, as I said, promote learner independent strategies, so they are able to continue in the asynchronous, in the non-live, in the homework environment, actually use certain apps and use certain technologies to improve themselves, and especially in terms of language development. So any platforms that we're utilizing, the students should receive some sort of training in how they can engage with that platform independently. I think that blending is the future of education, and like you're saying about distractions of mobile phones, we want to be able to create that positive distraction of when you're on a phone, you can also do this, and it is a learning event as such.
Absolutely. So it definitely doesn't just happen by bringing phones into the classroom. And I agree, not only do the students need training, but I think the teachers need support in understanding, right? How to
definitely.
use the technology they have to use, and also how to evaluate potential new technologies that they might want to introduce. Because it's not a simple equation necessarily, is it?
And there was a comment actually just there, which leads us on to our next one. Somebody made a comment about the utilization of we've discussed it before, Jenny, in private conversation, but the Samir model of actually utilizing technology in the classroom. It came up in a comment there. And when we look at the Samir model in terms of the utilization of technology, which is the next question, as far as I know, that's going to come across in a banner.
Definitely.
The utilization of technology is not just the substitution or the augmentation. It's not just using, as I said, a PowerPoint to replace a handout, but it's actually the M and R part, the modification and redefinition. So it's using something like voice recording to do tasks that you can't usually do without that. Using Google Documents for collaborative writing, or stuff that you might not be able to do without the utilization of technology. So modification and redefinition will help us enhance learning, and they help ensure that you're not just using technology as another tool, which often can get in the way of learning, but you're actually using it to bring students to the next level, promote their independent strategies, and teach them how to engage with technology in a positive way for their own education.
I think, and for me, when I'm bringing technology into the classroom, I do feel a little bit like that guide, if you like. The teacher has that responsibility, I think, towards the students to help guide them in, what content or technologies to try to engage with, specifically for language learning, and then how to do that. But in order for the teacher to be able to be that guide, we need the time and space to understand the technology, to really understand, is it motivating? Is it achieving learning outcomes? Is it manageable? All of those questions that teachers need to ask themselves probably about this technology, and then be able to go to the student and not necessarily, tell them, but have a framework for helping them maybe understand some of those questions as well.
Yeah. It's some interesting questions in the coming through the comments, and obviously there's the point that technology fails, and you cannot rely fully on technology for your lesson. You do have to have an alternative, a focus on the learning outcome, which can be achieved without technology. I think that's important. And another point that an interesting question, which we probably should have started with, is how important is it to actually use technology? I think it's fine if you don't. I think it's absolutely fine if you don't. But I think there's certain applications, certain tools can elevate learning and can enhance learning. And if you understand how to utilize them, and if students understand how to utilize them, they can really, really support and promote learning. Obviously, this can all be done and has been done for a long time without technology. But we've got tools out there which might be able to take students to the next step, might be able to help learners. And especially because a lot of our students anyway, they're going to be using certain platforms, certain learner management system, this kind of thing, when they move on into high school, university, into work. So promoting some sort of digital literacy, is part and parcel of what we're doing as educators. So really some interesting questions. So thank you.
I know there are so many that I keep sort of looking at the questions, and then it's very interesting to see the contributions. This idea of sort of being the guide, if you like, as the teacher. I think one of the questions we've got in here, or we definitely discussed, is how supported do you feel as teachers to be able to evaluate some of this technology, not just use it, implement it, but sort of to evaluate it, understand it, and really see there's that moment I think we all recognize as teachers where your student really gets something, or they're really engaged, and you almost see the change in their eyes, don't you, usually, or their body language. And that's what we want out of this technology, I think, bringing this technology into the classroom. We want that because it can achieve really interesting shifts in focus and in learning. But how do you feel as teachers in terms of being able to evaluate whether that technology is going to provide that enhancement to learning that Chris has talked about as well?
That's a big question.
It is a big question.
But
You're on
I
the
think,
teacher training side, Chris. Do you
yeah,
feel
no,
that comes through?
yeah, definitely. So what we look at generally is teacher competencies. You know, when you start off your preparatory training courses, your initial training courses, you look at what competencies you need to develop as a teacher in order to improve. And then as we go on through our careers, we try to identify certain competencies which we have strengths in, or we have weaknesses in, or whatever. And digital literacy and the utilization of digital tools in order to enhance learning, you know, is something which is growing. It's changing the teacher's role. And if we look at the teacher's role in a traditional classroom, there's, you know, obviously there's facilitation and everything which goes on. But now there's the mediation of the use of technology. There's and often things which happen in an online space are not immediately visible to the teacher. So there's a perhaps a blank space in terms of monitoring and assessment, and there's a certain amount of learner independence which needs to be presumed. So there's way more teacher competencies, which we're slowly kind of stumbling our way through as teachers, because we don't often have models of best practice. We as students, most of us are obviously have our apprenticeship of observation. We've been students in a classroom, primary, secondary, in university, and we see what a classroom looks like, typically without technology. So we don't have experience of being online learners. We don't have experience all the time of using apps and having asynchronous platforms which we can learn on. So we don't have this experience as students. We have to then try to develop it as teachers, and you know, it's a stressful time, and it's a really difficult challenge. What I would always think, just as a final point, what I would always think for teachers, it's to have achievable goals in terms of your digital plan. So say you're going to use one app, and you're going to try integrate that over a couple of weeks, and then hopefully that works, and then another app. And if you try to do everything tech and everything, that sometimes you lose the thread of what you're trying to do sometimes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good approach. I mean, that's a valid approach. There is no one, you know, perfect approach, but I think that we've probably all experienced that our students, and in my case, my children as well, are way more aware of, you know, apps, even, you know, learning apps, not just sort of social media and entertainment apps, but learning apps. So what I quite like to do with my students is ask them, what do you currently use for learning English? Because they probably are using some apps outside of the classroom for English learning. It's good to understand what they're learning, then maybe take a look at it. And in the past, I've also asked them to kind of present to the group, you know, just a short presentation, an English learning app that they like, right? So that we can kind of evaluate it together. And I agree with Chris. I think you may want to sort of do a little bit of research, talk to your students, see what's being discussed, maybe in some teaching forums, things like that. Pick an app that you think is going to help achieve a learning outcome or work in a specific area of the English training that maybe your students need help with, and try it for a couple of weeks. You don't use it exclusively, but see what it's like filtering it into some of your classes or to some of the homework elements or something like that, and try and evaluate what results you get. I've seen at least one comment here, which is so true, that says, you know, there's new stuff coming out all the time. How can you possibly keep up? You can't keep up with it. So you kind of need a strategy, I think, that focuses on what it is you're trying to achieve with your students, what's practical, right, for you in terms of hardware, internet access, things like that. And then I would definitely be inclined to ask my students what kind of things they're using at the moment. This idea of taking learning out of the classroom and making sure that people can continue this outside of the classroom space is brilliant for teachers, because as an example, I don't know whether any of you have children learning their times tables, but there's a fantastic times tables game which my son uses. And it means that when he goes back into that classroom and he's studying maths, the teacher isn't having to sit there saying, you know, what's 7 times 6? Because they've learned that outside of the classroom. Actually, that's kind of one of the concepts behind the pronunciation app that we've developed, is that it makes sense for some practice of English to do it maybe in a private space where you can have that immediate biofeedback. That's one of the fantastic elements of this computer, kind of any digital learning, is you should get this biofeedback, this immediate feedback on what you're doing. And then you can bring those skills back into the classroom and use them to have that communication with the teacher and the rest of the group.
Yeah.
So you can't keep up with it all. But I think having a strategy that just says, okay, let's look at what my students are currently using. If you think what they're using isn't good, tell them. I remember being pretty horrified about some of the online dictionaries that students of mine were using a few years ago. But actually, by engaging with them, you can shape a program to integrate some of this digital technology to make it the most effective, I think.
And it builds onto another question there, the difference in tech you might use in a class and in distance learning, and frequently we're using the same thing, but what we're really looking at is that difference between content and platform websites. If just to give a rough definition, a platform website, something as simple as Google Classroom, which has a learner management system, and there's loads of them like this. And then content websites are websites that you can actually take things from and use them, whether they're quizzes or whatever else, or handouts. So in a distance learning setting, you might use LMS more frequently. You might use a learner management system like Google Classroom more frequently. That might not be necessary in a face-to-face classroom, but certainly the type of content platform or apps you use are going to be quite similar in an online lesson and in a face-to-face lesson, obviously depending on your context. There's another one there on guidelines to use technology effectively in the classroom. Just to give you a general overview of a kind of a structure of your classroom. When you're planning a lesson, obviously you're going to think about four things. You're going to think about what is the learning outcome, what is success criteria, what am I going to do to assess that, and how am I going to build on that? So am I going to have to check, or am I going to have to build on? So basically, what do I want the learners to be able to do? What does that look like? How do I know? If that isn't achieved, what am I going to do? So you have your lesson framework, your learning outcome, your success criteria, your assessment, and your reaction. Technology, if you want to use it, is going to have to fit in there somewhere. It's going to have to be integrated into that mainstream. It's not going to be able to alter it because the learning outcome is what we're going to focus on in a particular lesson. So technology should help you achieve some of those things. And in terms of guidelines for effective use, it's anything which helps you achieve those things in as good a way without technology, or hopefully in a better way with technology. So the fear that I have, and it frequently happens, is that people want to use a tool, but they don't think how that's going to integrate into their lesson. They just use a particular tool, and it seems like it's outside the main stream of the lesson. I've got one final question about a comment. There's been a couple of comments. I think I saw at least one about digital natives. I'm always curious about that term, digital native, about the expectation we have of learners who are able to do so much online. And I have two kids myself. I know kids are fantastic, and they do certain things online and with tablets. But are we expecting that our students are proficient at learning online? Are independent learners online?
This thing about effectiveness, isn't it, Chris, as well? Effectiveness for that learning experience. And this is where I like to be able to really see the body language, the eyes, that change in that shift in focus, which is really, that's when you think, I might be onto something. This might actually promote some self-learning. Give the students a sense of more control or independence over what they want to see happening if you're bringing technology in order for it to be effective and enhance that teaching and learning interaction, I think.
Super. That's a great point there. Digital native is not a synonym of digital competence, and that's a reframing of what we're trying to do. And I do think that we need to train students in digital competence, even from a young age, because it's important. This digital literacy is very important in comprehending fake news and all of this kind of stuff. Because we want students, and they will be in the world engaging more and more with technology, and it's being judicious and being independent with that. Very, very, very useful.
Yeah.
There was one question slightly off topic, but it's a question that I'm always interested in. Can technology replace teachers? It's the kind of the big but
missed that one.
I think if you look at the popularity of things like what's the app that everyone, Duolingo, you know, it maybe not effectively, but currently artificial intelligence does some sort of replication of teachers. Exactly. No. We have to say never, you know, what we as teachers have to do is start to lean into skills which artificial intelligence is not going to be able to do. So soft skills, because frequently in situations where, you know, students are doing online distance learning, you do have some sort of online artificial intelligence which can serve some functions which a teacher might serve, not in the classroom, but perhaps in distance learning. And it's only going to get better. We know that with technology, it's only going to get better and better. So I just leave it open there. It certainly is a consideration.
I agree with what you said, Chris. And I think also not only do we want to lean in, but we really need to be influencing how these technologies develop. And you can only do that if you, as a teacher and, you know, with your learners, are engaging with it, right? Because, you know, you said Duolingo and there were immediately comments.
Everybody,
But you know, to just sort of play devil's advocate or try to be a bit pragmatic about it, of course, there are aspects of what Duolingo offers which are incredibly valuable to learners. And, you know, the question of whether Duolingo would replace a teacher, I think we can all agree the answer is no. But it's this enhancing, it's, you know, potentially adding something, even if it is extra practice of certain elements of language that person won't necessarily get if they're in a big class or they're a bit too nervous to kind of speak up or answer a question in class. So we have to, I think, as educators and technologists, which is where, you know, I'm sitting very much with those two hats on, be influencing how the learning user experience can be, you know, kind of brought to the fore. I do see a lot of apps. So just to be clear, you know, I publish a pronunciation learning and training app, which, you know, I've worked really closely with Oxford University Press. We use their content and we've not exactly digitized it, but we've used their content, their audio content, to create an audio-visual experience, which really does help people learn about pronunciation, speaking and listening. But I see a lot of apps out there, particularly in the pronunciation category, that really don't do that very well. And it makes me really sad, because you think you can't possibly have a teacher in the background with what you've developed, because there's no learner experience, there's no good learner outcomes, it's not giving people good feedback, you know, nothing. But
like because we talked about that digital competency as well, and if, you know, students of the future, the digital competency improves and they're more able to utilize artificial intelligence as independent learners. I do agree with, like, it's difficult to replace a human, but supplementation is definitely happening, you know.
It enhances what the teacher can do. So the reality with our app is that I've seen enhancements in the way that I, as a teacher, would teach with a student using this technology as well. Using the technology on its own is effective. It's better than nothing. But using the technology with the guidance and oversight of a teacher to do, as Chris said, you know, the things that the AI can't do, which is that guidance, that understanding of how the learning process actually works, or what it's like for that student or that group of students, or contextualized in terms of their life and their learning, right? Their motivations, their needs, etc., the outcomes they need. That's where the teacher really, you know, can't be replaced easily or quickly. But using the technology to enhance what we're able to give to students and help them achieve learning outcomes, absolutely.
Well, it's funny, Jenny, if we did this session 5 years ago, we would have laughed at artificial intelligence, you know, and now where will we be in 5 years, in 10 years? So I think we have to realize that sometimes decisions are made by governments and state actors in education systems, which, you know, might not be to the best benefit of teachers. So
the teachers do know best. Teachers do know best, and they need to be. I think one of the sessions later today is Paul Howard-Jones, who's a bit of a hero of mine, actually, and he's going to be talking, I think, about neurology and the learning experience. And in the other talks I've seen him give, is very much, the teachers are the ones who really know. It's all very well to have the tech or, the neuro experiment, but it's the teachers who really know. This is where both our challenge and our responsibility, I think, is to our students. The area that we're moving into now, which is really interesting for me as a technologist as well, is human computer interaction. Mm-hmm. And for me, what happens, it's specifically for the learning process I'm talking about. So what happens when you see your students engaging with tech, but not engaging at an artificial level, not because they're distracted, but because they're focusing in on that element of language learning, or it could be repetition. You get quite a lot with this human computer interaction kind of what happens is that people have more kind of capacity to repeat for longer, to practice for longer. They get kind of zoned in. And that is the sort of, I guess, feature of bringing digital into the classroom, which we want to kind of really bring into our teaching and bring into our learning systems to make it work for us and for our students.
And you mentioned challenges. I think that does bring us on to our next question.
Sorry, we may have gone slightly off our
because one of the challenges which I raised earlier on, and I know it is an issue all the time, is with connectivity, with when technology fails, and expecting certain applications won't run in certain contexts. I think connectivity is a massive issue in the classroom and outside the classroom. And I think in tandem with that is that idea of the digital divide, and how some students have, they have a quiet space at home where they can, use a tablet or whatever. Some students don't. Some students have a good, understanding or competency of using certain applications. Some students don't. So our job as teachers then becomes training in digital competency and overcoming this differentiation between connectivity and that digital divide differentiation. So they're two of the big challenges, along with costing, for schools.
Absolutely. I mean, we when Oxford University Press and I first came up with this concept for the Say It app, we were very clear actually that we wanted it to be able to work offline, which it does. Once you've downloaded the content into the app, it works offline. I think a lot of apps do and sort of systems rely on that, connectivity, but not all of them. And, that for me is a kind of, if you can, so it's not possible with every system, but if you can create a system where you're not relying all the time on that Wi-Fi connection, that is promoting something it's more egalitarian, it's more accessible, hopefully, to people to be able to use more effectively. But
there's and everyone is kind of internet connection. There's also the and I completely agree, use of technology for technology's sake. Using technology is not always progress. It has to be judicious. It has to fill in with what you're doing. It has to achieve the learning outcome in as good as, if not better, than what you're doing, ideally better. One of the other things which will come back, I think, especially if you're teaching primary, if you're using a lot of technology, screen time in the classrooms, parents are not always happy with how much screen time students have, and there can be that overuse and that distraction which comes with utilizing tablets and mobile phones, where if this is not clearly communicated with parents or other stakeholders, it can seem just like you're playing games, or you're kind of doing. And people mentioned YouTube. I mean, YouTube is just it's a place that people can get lost in, and students can get lost in very, very quickly if you're trying to use that in a classroom. So internet connection, seems to be the biggest challenge that people are mentioning again and again. And it kind of brings us then into the student experience. As we jump swiftly from challenges to the student experience. We've kind of talked about the student experience a little bit, in that we don't know enough about student experience. But I'd be interested to see how your students react. How your students react when you do use technology. Do your students really enjoy it, or do they get Kahoot fatigue? Which I think exists in a lot of classrooms. have you noticed a big difference if you do a full lesson with no technology or you do a lesson with a lot of technology? Have you noticed that your students are more interested, more engaged, and they achieve the learning outcome to a more successful criteria? Depends on the age.
Depends on the age of the students. That definitely resonates for me. I think in the experience I've had mostly with the younger learners, I would say, I've been in classrooms with sort of 8 and 9-year-olds, plugging in the Say It app into the big kind of interactive whiteboard, so they could suddenly see this thing on a big screen, which they've never really seen before anyway. So that's kind of interesting to them, a sound wave, and and hearing the sounds slowed down, which sounds quite funny. And then they take it in turns to come up to the front and control that, so that they're kind of interacting with the app, but the whole class is able to see what's going on, and they get hyper engaged.
I wonder, because it's a couple of people have mentioned it there. Are we riding the crest of the wave at the moment where a lot of it is new, so students are really interested in technology, but when they move through from primary into secondary and they've been doing it for a few years, will that enthusiasm still exist, or are we going to actually have a backlash and people say, no, we actually want to do this? It's going to be an interesting year or two, I think, as we start to see that backlash. Maybe we won't.
Maybe. No, I think your prediction could be we come back in a year or two and do this session again, Chris. And I think you're right there. I mean, clearly, from the pandemic, people had an element of screen fatigue, and there was not being able to see people face to face. That same sense will be reflected in the classroom as well. But yes, I think switching between. And again, this comes down to lesson planning and understanding what's effective, what's manageable, right? Because some of these technologies are so, it's just everything everywhere. If you can kind of chunk it down so that you get that mix, that's got to be the most effective way to do it, hasn't it? To give people a mix.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to this is fantastic if we can use that mix, but the teachers have to be trained how to do it.
They do.
There's a lot of responsibility has been put on teachers' shoulders during the pandemic. If schools then switch to hybrid learning, another completely different context of teaching, and then moving into now where integration of technology into the classroom is an expectation, teachers need to be supported. Teachers need to be supported in terms of training and development, whether login codes and whatever is needed for certain platforms. So this can't all be put on the teachers. It goes higher up, I think.
Oh, definitely. And that maybe brings me back to the point I wanted to make earlier about interacting with your students. There is, I don't believe there's any kind of one set plan for how this should be done. It's all a bit of a new frontier. But engaging with perhaps the people, within your school, so the other teaching professionals, but also where it's appropriate with the students to understand, what they're already using, how they're reacting, how they're useful they're finding different technologies or not, and then creating a plan that's right for your environment, I think is that is a lot of responsibility on teachers. But on the other hand, it's worth it if you can control, I guess, the plan that gets the learning outcomes and the engagement and the motivation. We haven't really used that word enough in this session, actually. The motivation, the comments have been mentioning it a lot. The students love the technology, and as the teacher, I think the key responsibility is really understanding, is it going to achieve the learning outcomes? So is it going to be manageable, and is it going to be effective?
It's interesting, I'm just again reading some of the comments. We put such an emphasis on technology, but we could just as easily be sitting here talking about handouts and photocopies, because they are tools in order to enhance learning. So I mean, whatever way we're using them, that has to be our baseline focus. The students needs, and how we're going to progress every single individual student in the room. And technology is something which is, if used correctly, appropriately, is going to help us do that. So and again, that leads us on to our final question, I think, which is getting the most out of technology, which is going to appear on the screen Nah.
Any minute now.
Any minute now.
It's there somewhere.
So,
but yes, it's out of technology.
So I always think, obviously, keeping that as a baseline, keeping that idea of your learning outcomes, that's standard. Technology is supporting that. But having a school policy on what technology is used, and the school must support that, whether it's providing tablets, phones, good Wi-Fi, whatever else, training for the teachers in using technology, some training for the students maybe, or something like that. So there has to be a policy. It cannot just be the teacher alone, once again, going in and trying to push back the tide. I do think you should have a limited range of tools, one or two, to use it a lot, and then add another one if you want, add another one, starting to come in with 5 different logins for platforms and this kind of thing. So stressful.
Yeah. Remembering passwords and logins. Yeah.
And then the last one, Jenny, sorry, just because the focus on learner independence, as I said before, that promotion of learner independence, and that's, they are kind of the crucial things in the full utilization. Sorry, over
definitely.
to you.
No, just that there's a focus paper which I think does kind of summarize a lot of this stuff from maybe quite a what would we say? No, it's a researchy written focus paper on using technology to motivate learners, and I believe there's a link in the link tree or something. Focus paper, there we go. I can see it now, I think, in the comments. Focus paper. And it does also include some sections on sort of the kind of questions that as a school or as an educator, a group of educators, you need to be asking yourselves to evaluate whether certain technologies are going to be effective. And everybody's set of circumstances are going to be different. So there isn't a one size fits all, but there is a couple actually of really good checklists in there that just give some baseline questions to be asking about whether you can use this technology manageably and effectively with your students to improve learning outcomes. And I totally agree with Chris. Do not try and overload the basket of stuff, having 2 or 3 technologies that will work well for you is the way forward. We also have, I think, a link to an article, a blog post, which includes a couple of just takeaway activities at the end of the blog post. The blog post, I think, is called something like using technology in the classroom, something along those lines. But there are 2 activities at the end. One is about encouraging maybe your students to review and kind of share their experience of different digital learning resources, which, as I said, is always the place I like to start, because I want to know what my students are using, and there may well be something useful in there. And also, if they're using something that's not so useful, I want to be able to maybe explain to them why not and suggest an alternative. So there's a short profile of an activity for reviewing and sharing digital learning resources. And there's also a suggestion for something I did in a primary school classroom, which was loads of fun, which was an English learning app mini hack. So the idea is that you ask your students to design an English learning app, right? So how would they do it? How would they do it better than Duolingo? For example, so they need to come up with a name for the product. They can design an icon. They can explain maybe in words or with the drawings what the app's going to do. How does it help? This all gets them thinking about how effective are these technologies in helping me learn? So you're getting them to kind of think about it from the other way around. But it's fun doing that together. They can draw a wireframe to show how it'll work, write the promo text, work out how much it's going to cost. I think we're out of time, are we, Sean?
Oh yes, yeah. I've given you more time than I'll let you
sorry.
Chris, you wanted to say something. Go on.
Oh, there was just so many questions. One thing I was going to say, it's come up a bit, is who's going to train us in using technology. I would always suggest classroom research. So classroom research and knowledge share sessions with your colleagues. So I tried this app, we did this, let's all try it, let's do this kind of thing. In the absence of somebody to actually come in and train the staff, classroom research is vital.
But technology companies have a responsibility to do that as well. So if your school is using a particular technology, ask them to get in touch with the people who are selling the technology into the school and say, what kind of training programs do you have? Because they do have that responsibility, in my opinion.
You're not wrong, and the training side is often overlooked. Full stop. And I think that people do concentrate on the technology a lot rather than than actually how to use the technology with it. Thank you both. Sorry to cut in, but there are other speakers waiting. So while we could give you the floor for much longer, it is time to say thank you for that, and thank you very much as well personally, because I'm doing a talk on AI in education in a week or so, and you've given me some great quotes I can use for that. So so from a personal note, I'm not going to misquote you, but my angle is that AI in education is a fallacy. And I think you both proved that for me.
I'd love to see that talk. Can you send me an invite?
It's actually face to face, so that's an odd one, isn't it? Anyway, thank you both for doing that. As you said, there are lots of questions. There are lots of comments from it. So apologies to anybody that we didn't get to answer. I think Chris and Jenny did a marvelous job of trying to plow through as many of the things as possible. And as Jenny said at the end, there is a focus paper that the link has been shared through the comment feed that you can link on and see there. And I'm sure that there'll be an ongoing conversation with it. If you're watching the recording, for example, and your questions haven't been answered, then do leave a comment, because people will go back and see them there. But for now, it's been a real pleasure listening to you both for the last half hour, Chris and Jenny. I'm going to remove you from the stream. Thank you for it. Oh, and just to those people that asked, Jenny's app, and she did say it a few times, but people have been asking about the app. It's called Say It, SAY It, and it is done in conjunction with Oxford University Press. So if you do go to the OUP website, you can see it there. A number of people did put it out. There you go. And it is
take a look. It's on the OLT catalog, Oxford University Press catalogue. So.
It is so much fun to play with. I just you sit there. I find myself addictively slowing down the voice just to see. And my pronunciation is terrible, so the app has just proved that my pronunciation is terrible. So there you go. So thank you very much, Jenny and Chris. I look forward to listening to you both at another time. For now, goodbye, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying with us. We are in ELTOC June version 2022, and as the comment on the screen says, if you liked it, like it. If you loved it. We are a few minutes away from the next talk. Let me just remind you, as I think our wonderful moderating team has already done, if you are watching this live, or if you're watching the recording before 9 o'clock British summertime on Monday morning, and you want a certificate, then click on the link which has been appearing through the comment box on the social media channel you are on. If you click on that link will take you to a web page, and one of the things you can do on that web page is do the process of getting a certificate. But you'll also find lots of other information on there about OUP, about the position papers, about some of the things that our speakers have been talking about, as well as links to various OUP resources that are on offer throughout ELTOC. And also, very importantly, I think if you want to know about the next installment of ELTOC, which will be, I'm sure, start planning the moment we finish this one, then go and sign up to one of the social media channels, and then you'll find that information there. So today we're broadcasting to you on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter. And if you're not on one of those, you're not following or friending or subscribing, then do that so you can be part of the community going forward to the third installment of ELTOC, which I'm sure will be later this year. So before we go on to the final presentation of today, let's take a few minutes just to look at some of updates from Oxford University Press itself. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to hand the floor over to two wonderful people who've been sat there for ages patiently while listening along. So Susanna and Merv, I'm going to bring you into the stream and let's find out about what's going on in the press. And when you want the video on, just let me know and I'll put it on for you. Okay,
thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Zuzana.
And my name is Marve.
And we are customer success consultants working with Europe, Middle East and North Africa. And in our role, we help teachers to make the most out of our digital technologies.
Hope you're enjoying ELTOC so far with lots of trendy and exciting ELT topics. We would like to take this chance to introduce you to a brand new platform by Oxford University Press, which has been designed for the last 2 years to streamline your technology use in the classroom and enable your professional development growth at the same time. But first, we have two questions for you.
Let's start with the first one. The first question is, have you ever heard of Oxford English Hub? You can type it into the comments. The first question, have you ever heard of Oxford English Hub? Maybe you've already heard about it from your local representative, or you saw some of the marketing on social media, and maybe it's completely new for you, and that's great. That's why we are here today. I see lots of yeses and I see lots of no's. You just need to know for now that Oxford English Hub is our brand new launchpad for learning. And we are going to tell you a little bit more already with the second question. So let's move to that.
Okay, what is true of Oxford English Hub? And let's do some guessing here. You can type your answers in the comments like A, B, C, and D. A, it provides teachers and students with everything needed for their English courses. B, it brings together all digital course materials. C, it works on any device. And D, all are correct. You can type in the comments A, B, C, or D. I'm just scrolling through them right now.
Or 1, 2, 3, 4. You can choose.
Great.
Number or letter.
Great. Lots of these coming in. Great. Okay. Thanks for the great guesses. Actually, the correct answer was D. Indeed, Oxford English Hub is our new launchpad for learning. That gives teachers and students access to all digital course materials in one place on any device.
Exactly as Merve said. And it also provides you with everything you need on every step of your teaching journey. So for teachers, you can plan, teach, assign, track, or access directly from Oxford English Hub. You can find classroom presentation tools, online practice, ebook, gradebook, teachers' resources, and especially free professional development. And that's really exciting. But let's not forget about your students, because your students can also access all of the interactive content which enhances learning, like online practice, classroom, ebooks, or audio and video resources. And the good news is that this summer, all of our hot off the press and best-selling international titles are already available on Oxford English Hub. So for primary, you can already find resources for Beehive or Bright Ideas or Oxford Discover second edition. For secondary, you can find Live Vision, Inside second edition, or Oxford Discover Futures. And for adults, English File 4th edition, Headway 5th edition, Q Skills for Success 3rd edition, or American English File 3rd edition are also available. And if you haven't found your course yet, don't worry, we're constantly working on adding more and more. And if there's anything you would like to ask so far, based on what we have just told you, please put in your questions into the comments. We will do our best to answer that.
Okay, now let's grab the opportunity to access your course on Oxford English Hub by following the steps that will be demonstrated in the video that we are going to show you in a second. Can we please have the video?
First, click on the link in the chat box and go to the free trial webpage. Then, choose the course you want to explore on Oxford English Hub. We'll choose Beehive. Now, fill out the form and look at your inbox for an email with the free trial code. Here is the email. Follow the instructions. Copy the code and redeem as instructed in the email. There you go. Now, if you have an Oxford ID, you can log into Oxford English Hub. If not, you can register for an Oxford ID like this. Now you can sign in. Click on your teacher role and you'll see your code is already here for you to redeem. Congratulations, you've successfully activated your 90-day free trial for Beehive.
As you can see here, you'll have access to classroom presentation tools, online practice, teacher's guide, professional development, and many more. And I've just seen Elva in the comments. Yes, that's correct. It's professional development for teachers all in one place, Elva. And I think this is all from us for now. So don't forget to click the link in the comments to get your 90-day free trial access and enjoy teaching with Oxford English Hub.
Thank you so much. It was great seeing all of your positive comments. We are glad that some of you are excited about Oxford English Hub. If you don't know, for those who don't know it yet, make sure to click on that link and enjoy the rest of the ELTOC. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, both. Excellent to find out what the English Hub is. I was one of those people that wasn't sure what it was, so now I have an idea, and I will be signing up for my 90-day trial as soon as I finish this. So thank you both for joining in. As the lady said, if the links have been going through the comment box, if you want to find out, get your trial, then do go click on one of those links, and that has gone through, and you will be able to see the way to sign up and get your trial of the hub. And if you're watching the recording, that still applies to you. That link that we've been putting in about the certificates, etc., or those links that have been going through, you can still click on those links. If you are watching the recording and it's before Monday the 27th of June at 9 o'clock BST, you're still eligible for a certificate. If it's after that time, then the certificate eligibility has gone, but you will still be able to click on the link and find those resources and get access to the resource pack. So this is a good chance, perhaps if you're watching live, to tell your colleagues if they're missing it that they can come and see the recording, and they can click on the link and bring other people into the wonderful ELTOC community. I'm sure, like me, many of you have been to lots of the ELTOC events, and it is a friendly gathering of people every few months or so. So just just one more reminder that if you are looking for a certificate for the event, you've got to claim it before Monday morning. That's Monday the 27th at 9 BST. If you are just joining us, welcome. If you've just got to this point in the recording, welcome. We're still here, and we've got one more one more session to go. I say talk. We've got Professor Paul Howard-Jones and Claudia Lopez coming to you very shortly, and this will be the last session of the first block of ELTOC. Although remember that ELTOC is in 2 blocks, and there is another block later on today, which would be, in my time in the UK, be early morning, but for those of you in Asia and in other time zones, probably more accessible to you then. So let's do the final session. We heard in the previous session that the next speaker is one of Jenny's heroes, I think she said. So coming to us now for the final session of this block, we've got Paul Howard-Jones, who is a professor of neuroscience and education at the School of Education at the University of Bristol, and his work has focused on the interface of cognitive neuroscience and educational theory, practice, and policy. He applies diverse research methods from computational brain imaging studies to classroom observations in order to understand learning processes and their potential relevance to educational learning. He has authored numerous reviews and books about the science of learning, most recently The Evolution of the Learning Brain, published by Routledge. And if you do click on the certificate link that we put on it, you will be able to access some of Paul's website and that from there. Claudia Lopez, our other speaker in this session, has been involved in the educational sector for over 30 years in a variety of contexts, including teaching, teacher training, consultancy, and materials development. She is a psychologist and holds an MBA in marketing with a specialization in psychopedagogy. Wow, that's a great phrase, isn't it? Psychopedagogy. And is a certified media and information literacy trainer. She's a strong believer in continuous professional development, and her main interests are active methodologies, global skills, and the science of learning. So, without further ado, let's bring them both on screen. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the screen. Claudia, welcome to the screen. I shall leave you with the floor. Enjoy your session.
Thank you very much, Sean. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Claudia. Hi.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us here today. I'm Claudia Lopes, and right now I'm in the beautiful city of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And I would like to say it's a great pleasure to be here with Professor Paul Howard-Jones from the University of Bristol to talk about a very special and relevant topic, which is how the brain learns and what that means for our teaching practice. Paul, would you like to greet our teachers?
I mean, it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to talking about the brain. I've brought one along with me, so we can talk about the one in front of me. And I think neuroscience is becoming increasingly important to education. And I know, at our own university, for example, we're now incorporating some neuroscience into teacher education. And also we have a framework in the UK for teacher education, which is now mentioning concepts like working memory, long-term memory, these sorts of scientific ways of thinking about learning.
Well, that's great, Paul. And before we start, I'd like to find out what our teachers already know about the science of learning. Do you know how the brain learns? Yes or no? So let's go to the chat. Please type yes or no in the chat box. And I'm looking forward to seeing how much our teachers already know about the brain. So let's go there. Wow. Paul, I can see that many teachers are answering the question, and it's good to know that some of them already know something about the science of learning. Hello, Miriam. Many people from different parts of the world. Some of them know something about the brain, others don't. And Paul, talking a bit about the two hemispheres, we know that the brain has two hemispheres. Could you talk a bit about the integration of the brain hemispheres and its importance to learning?
Yeah, sure. So, it is true that we all have two hemispheres. So, that's a good start. We've got a left side of the brain, we've got a right side of the brain. And it's also true that there are some things that we do, like language, which activate more of one side than the other. So language, for example, will activate more of the left hemisphere than the right hemisphere. But actually, even for language, which we say is strongly left lateralized, if I was to start telling a story or something, or writing a story, I would be using both sides of the brain, because the two hemispheres are connected together with something which is called the corpus callosum. You can see it here in white. And that's like an information superhighway that allows both sides of the brain to communicate with each other in a complex, sophisticated fashion. And anything, even just picking up my teaspoon, is actually going to involve both sides of the brain. So yes, there's a sense in which brain activity is lateralized for different types of activity, different types of learning. But actually, it doesn't really make sense when we start talking about people as being left-brained or right-brained, because any small task, let alone the complex types of task involved in learning, actually require both sides of the brain.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Paul, what about the 4 different lobes? What do they do, and what is their importance in the learning process?
Okay, so probably the part that most educators might be most interested in would be the frontal lobes. That's because a lot of our conscious reasoning takes place there. And when we first learn something, we have to apply effort and consciously attend to it. And that tends to activate what we call the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is at the front, at the top. And that's our working memory networks. So that's holding information very temporarily for a few seconds in our conscious attention, and it requires effort to do that. So the frontal lobe's very important for learning. It's also where we do a lot of our conscious reasoning as well. But let's not forget the other parts of the brain, because they're really important too. First of all, we have the parietal lobes, very important for automatic processing. So when you're learning mathematics or you're learning reading until it becomes automatic, it's a lot of activity is going to be taking place here, particularly when we've learnt those things so well that they have become automatic. Weirdly, at the back of the brain, we have the occipital lobes, which are all about visual processing, and that's kind of odd, because obviously the eyes are at the front, but that's I won't go into it, but there are stories, evolutionary narratives to explain that. And then on either side we have the temporal lobes, and those are important because a lot of our declarative memory, a lot of our memory formation requires processes that activate those regions, actually. So it's just behind the temporal lobes that we have something called the hippocampus. And that, once we've learnt something and it's activated our working memory, it will get stored in the hippocampus before it gets laid out, laid down and actually distributed across the cortex. And we shouldn't forget the bits inside either. So, they're too small for me to show you on the video camera, but there's really some important bits here. I've already mentioned the hippocampus because that's really important for laying down new memory. But also we have the amygdala and other emotional centers. So when we feel emotions, a lot of that is activating these inner areas, these subcortical areas, subcortical because they're under the cortex. And that's important for education, because for us to become engaged in learning, that is actually an emotional response. So when we feel we want to move towards something, we want to move towards our learning, there's a region here. One of my particular favorite parts of the brain is a little P-shaped thing called the nucleus accumbens. And the more you want something, the more that activates. And we've shown in our own brain imaging studies that actually that's true for education as well. So if I give you something which is really interesting and novel, and you want to find out about it, I can guarantee that will increase activity in that region of the brain.
Yeah, and Paul, when we talk about engagement and English language teaching, many teachers and trainers talk about the benefits learners may have from being taught in their preferred learning style. For example, if they are visual, auditory, or more kinesthetic. What's your opinion about that?
Well, some of the justification for teaching to learning styles has come about because the brain is organized in a way that appears to separate the senses. So as well as important for memory, this temporal lobe close to the ear is important for auditory processing, the processing of sound. I said at the back of the brain, we've got visual cortex as well, which is important for seeing. But the brain is incredibly interconnected. So if I just showed you a picture of a bell or something that made a noise, I'm actually wondering if in my very messy shape, you can probably see there's a guitar there. Now, when you see that guitar, probably, even though you're just seeing it, it will probably activate your auditory cortex.
Yes.
Because the association with the sound of a guitar is so strong. So that's how interconnected the brain is. So actually, it doesn't really make sense to justify learning styles in that way. Excuse me. And when you look at the educational research, there doesn't seem to be any benefit from teaching to somebody as if they are a visual learner or an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner. Actually, using all the senses can be really important for learning. Not because it's just good to use all the senses, but because it allows us to represent things in different ways. That's particularly important for language learning, because you're seeing the word, you're hearing the word. The word has associations of taste maybe and smell, and all of making connections across like that, so that you're getting multiple representations in the brain of even just one single word. It really helps access that word and remember that word. So it's great that we've got all these senses because it allows us to communicate in so many different ways, but it's making the connections between those different representations, which is so important.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed we've got a question about the aging brain from Noah.
Yes.
What happens in the brain when we get older? Actually, the good news is that our ability to learn continues throughout our lifetime, and so our plasticity, our ability to change our brain, not just in terms of its function, but also the size of the different bits even, and the connections between them, that carries on throughout our life. So our brain continues to be plastic, continues to be able to support us. The bad news is the plasticity does reduce a little bit, and although it hasn't been shown to affect our learning or our cognition, the brain shrinks as well. So one of the reasons I don't go in a brain scanner is because I don't want to see how small my brain's become. It does shrink a little bit.
And we are lifelong learners, and to learn, we must be engaged. And I have a £1 million question to ask you. How can we generate engagement for learning? Rewards, maybe using rewards in the classroom?
Well, you mentioned £1 million. If you put £1 million in front of me and said, this is yours if you learn, then I can guarantee my nucleus accumbens at the front, just underneath, would definitely activate. So yes, extrinsic rewards like that can be actually very motivating. What we find from the neuroscience is that actually intrinsic rewards, things which motivate us because they appeal to something inside us, like our interest, our curiosity, also activate the same region of the brain in the same way. And that part of the brain, that reward center that causes us to approach our learning, is activated also by novelty. So if something is different, it will get us engaged. If we are sharing our attention to something, so if we're all looking at something together, and this is a massive thing for sport, where you've got a whole stadium and we're all focusing on the ball and the players, that is incredibly engaging, because we are sharing our attention. Curiosity, I've mentioned as well, which has sort of got to do with novelty, but also social rewards like praise. So if I say, well done to you, or that I'm the sort of teacher that will say well done, that will also motivate us as well. And all of those things, some of them are intrinsic, some of them are extrinsic to us, but they all activate that reward system. And that's really important for two reasons. One, because it orients our attention towards that whatever situation. Got to make sure that the reward is related to the situation as well. That's quite important. Otherwise, you're just distracting them, but also it increases the dopamine coming up into the frontal cortex, and that increases your plasticity. It increases the rate at which you make connections in the brain, and it means you're more likely to remember what is going on. So actually activating the reward system to engage the learner is really, really important.
And nowadays, high levels of anxiety and short attention span are very common problems we face in our classrooms. We are talking about engagement, but could you talk a bit about disengagement for learning?
Yeah, so in a way, it's kind of similar processes, but we're not talking about the reward system, but we are talking about regions still in the subcortex, because it's still an emotional response. But I've had situations, even myself as a learner, where I felt slightly humiliated, or I felt out of my depth, and I can't really cope with this situation, and that starts inducing increased activation in the amygdala, which is a fear center. And again, that will actually influence the cortex, slightly different mechanism, but it will influence your attention, not in a positive way. You'll want to look away. So you've now got this response that is causing you to look away from the situation, and you can learn that and then make it more difficult. I've just been asked by Olga whether my books have been translated into Russian. No, they haven't. But if you'd like to do that, that would be fantastic. But they are available in Korean and I think this is being published in Vietnamese as well soon. So engagement really important.
Yeah, and now I'd like to address. I'm going to share a picture, and I would like to address. Just a second, please. I guess I have a technical problem here. Oh, now it's working.
Right.
I'd like to address a question to our teachers. Please use the chat box to write your answers. And, well, can you think about any possible connections between black cab drivers of London and brain plasticity? What do you think? Let's use the chat box and write your answers there.
I just, while we're looking at that, Jenny Dance has asked whether there's any neurological evidence that multisensory input improves speed and effectiveness of language learning. And this comes basically no, unless you're using it to make connections. So you can use multisensory input. Obviously, you're speaking language, you're looking at the written language, and making that connection is a really important aspect of language teaching. So encouraging that link to be made, yes, there is evidence for that. So I suppose what I'm saying is, don't go into your lessons thinking that you have to use all the senses. That's not what it's about. Think about different ways in which language can be represented, both in terms of its meaning, and that can be like smell and touch and all those sorts of things, as well as visual and auditory, but also in terms of its sound and in terms of its written form as well. And it's having opportunities to make connections between those that's really important. If your children are young, actually, because their brains are less mature, they will have more difficulty in making those connections. So sometimes you need to provide more scaffolding. Say, can you read these words out, and do you remember what this had to do with what you experienced in this context or whatever? So have we got some interesting answers?
Yeah, we do, and many interesting answers. Some teachers are asking us to repeat the question. So can you think about any possible connections between black cab drivers of London and brain plasticity? So
I can see there are some interesting ideas coming through which I hadn't thought about. And actually, I mean, Iris is correct, actually, that taxi drivers do get a map of London plastered on their brain. We build an internal representation of what's happening externally. But I think the person who's probably closest is Maria de Los Angeles. She's saying that she's read that part of taxi drivers' brain related to spatial intelligence, I would say spatial processing, but is actually bigger than usual because they use it a lot. And she's absolutely correct. And this is a fascinating study that was done 20 years ago. Not only that, but they've been able to show that the size of the hippocampus of taxi drivers, and remember I said that was a really important part of the brain for laying down memories, is related to how many years of experience taxi drivers have. So if they've been driving their taxis for 20 years, that part of the brain is going to be much larger than somebody who's just started learning to drive a taxi. Now, I have to say a big caveat with this is the study was done 20 years ago before sat-nav. So, of course, everybody now has a computer, including the taxi drivers. So I'm not sure this would be true anymore. But the important thing is that the brain changes its structure, the different size of the different parts of the brain in relation to learning. And they've shown this with learning in academic situations as well. So 3 months of swatting for an exam, different parts of your brain will increase their size as a result of that, and actually carry on increasing for a few months afterwards before they start decreasing down again. So it just shows how important your job is, because actually, teachers are the ones who are the professionals who actually have a daily responsibility to change the structure of the brains of their students.
Yeah, I agree entirely with you. And I always say that to be meaningful and lasting, new knowledge must be built on prior knowledge. Am I right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this is an Vygotsky, Piaget, although their theories were different, they all incorporated this idea of new knowledge, making contact and building on old knowledge. And actually the neuroscience has backed that up and given further insight by showing that the regions of the brain responsible for making those connections, which are actually in the medial wall of the cortex at the front, but they are still at the front. And those are regions that carry on developing structurally until late teens. So you might be 19, 20, 21. So, throughout childhood, if we know that there are developmental structural changes, we know firstly that it's a special time for learning, but also that the younger learners may need more support in making those connections. So we might automatically think, oh yes, that's a new word, but it's kind of similar to the word that I learnt yesterday, and that might be an important link. Whereas a younger learner may actually need support. They might need to see those words that they learnt yesterday before you go on to the new words, or they might even need to be asked explicitly, does this look similar to a word that we saw yesterday? So you know, scaffolding links.
Yeah, scaffolding. That's it. Yeah. And Paul, there's a very interesting question from Sehun. He asks, why is it more difficult to learn when you get older?
Well, I mean, this refers back to what we were discussing at the beginning about changes that take place in the brain. So when you're very, very young, and you know, I mean, actually, there's some massive changes taking place in the first few years of life. We even have things called sensitive periods, when it becomes more difficult to learn after we've left those sensitive periods. A good example of that is language, because I tried to learn Russian when I was 30. And the problem was that I had never heard the Russian language before I was 6 months old.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So if a baby hears the sounds of languages before 6 months old, they will remain sensitive to the difference between those sounds. So we're born with complete sensitivity to all the languages, all the language sounds in the world. But by 6 months, that sensitivity is closing down, and we are just focusing on the sounds in the languages we hear around us. And so it took me a very long time to hear the difference between a t and a t. Even now, I have difficulty with that. But in Russian, they know that where you're putting your tongue, you know, to make those two different sounds. So that is a crucial difference. But then our brains do remain plastic, with some sensitive periods probably in adolescence as well, to do with our identity. And all of childhood is an important time for learning. And then we go into adulthood. We can still learn. Our brains remain plastic, but not as plastic as a younger person's. And so what happens is we get more crystallized intelligence based on knowledge and understanding that we have accumulated, you know, and that includes about different languages as well. But our more fluid intelligence, our ability to learn totally new frameworks, that becomes more reduced, sadly. But, you know, it's actually a lot to do with what you do as a learner. So when you look at the connections of, you know, there was a fantastic study done on Carmelite nuns, and they donated their brains to neuroscience, and they were able to see that the state of the brain in terms of the connectivity, the number of connections, the synapses, we call them, actually rested on whether the nuns had been challenging themselves with new things to learn. So it's not a matter of just doing the same language every day. If you go off and learn a new language, that's going to increase your cognitive capacity and your ability to learn.
Yeah, and we learn languages to communicate, and I would like our colleagues to upload the next slide so that we can talk a bit about our mirror neuron system. Paul, could you explore that a bit more? Building knowledge and understanding and the mirror neuron system. How can that help us to communicate better?
Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating research that is coming through from neuroscience. At first, it generated a lot of controversy, but I think now it's being accepted more and more, that we have networks in our brain that help us mirror the brains of those around us. So, you know, Claudia, you're doing that at the moment with your head, right? It's encouraging me to do the same thing. And actually, even if I wasn't doing the same thing, my brain would be activating as if I was doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I wave my arms around, everybody who's watching this, their brain is activating as if they are waving their arms around like this. You know, they may not even be aware of that. I may not even be aware that I'm moving my hands. And yet our brains have begun to mirror each other. Now, why would that be? Well, scientists believe that this is a way of getting inside other people's heads. And it's not just about waving hands, you know, it's about the little movements, including the micro expressions in your face. So if you show stress or a lack of confidence in what you're teaching, your student will be automatically mirroring that brain activity and experiencing that themselves, whether they know it or not. So this is actually really raising the bar in terms of what a teacher is expected to do, because we used to say, you know, please, you know, do as I do, or whatever. Or,
Yeah.
But now we're saying, think and feel as I think and feel. So, you know, yeah, as I say, I think your emotional response to what you're doing and being interested and excited about what you're doing and loving your language or loving, you know, teaching actually is incredibly important because you're transmitting that all the time.
Yes. Body language is something very, very important. But now I would like to ask our colleagues to upload next slide, because we have a task for our audience, and it has to do with consolidation of learning. Well, folks, oh, something wrong happened here. Oops. I'd like to ask you to think about a hat. Think about a hat. Okay? Close your eyes for 10 seconds and think about a hat. What color is it? What's the size of this hat? What's the shape? Now let's take a look at the screen and tell us, can you find your hat there, or at least a similar one? Could you? So Mariana thought about a green hat. Isabella is thinking about a black hat. We have different sorts of hats, and I'm sure, Paul, that no one has a similar hat there. What do you think? Could you think about a hat yourself?
I love thinking about hats because...
Why? Tell us.
I love thinking about hats because in a way, to me, they represent ideas. Every hat is an idea. Or maybe every hat is a different way of thinking about a word that you're learning, you know, a different context for using that word. And we've mentioned consolidation of learning. And what happens in consolidation of learning is that information that started off in your working memory networks here actually becomes distributed across the cortex, where all of your other memories are stored and distributed. I mean, I did say they hung about a little bit in the hippocampus. Hippocampus is very important for this process. But, you know, in a few days' time, after you've learned that word, it will be distributed across your cortex. If it's going to be permanent, if it's going to be usable, and also if it's going to be useful. Okay, so these hats are really about how things become useful. What makes a hat useful? Well, from my mind, what makes it useful is if I've got lots of hats in my house, you know, because then I know I can find the right hat for the right occasion. And, you know, I'm at least going to be able to find a hat. So what you want is not just one representation, not just one idea about a word, but actually you want to have seen and experienced that word in a whole load of different contexts, because then it will become consolidated. It will have become distributed across your brain and made contact with all of those other things, and you'll have loads of different representations for that word. In other words, loads of different hats, and you're going to be able to find that word much more easily because it will be making contact with all the other things you know, but also you're more likely to find the right usage of that word for that right context.
So it would be easier to recall and use it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And Paul, to be able to do all those things, sleep is essential, right? Sleep's essential for the consolidation of learning.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah, and people don't sleep very well today. If we don't sleep, we don't learn. So what do you think about that?
Well, yes. I mean, the thing is, one of the best ways of getting your learning distributed like this is to encourage your learner to use the word in different contexts. You know, and don't keep testing them in the same context, because that's just going to form one representation of the word. So there's work to be done in terms of the teacher and the learner in terms of this consolidation process, rehearsal in different contexts. But actually, there's also a really important part of this process which relates to sleep. Every creature we know that learns, and that even is true for the humble bee, actually remembers better after they've had a sleep, because it's during sleep that a lot of this consolidation occurs. And you can put people in brain scanners. You can see the brain activity that is being created when you're learning something. As you go to sleep, if you scan your brain, you'll see the similar activities, because the hippocampus is playing out that memory to your cortex, and it's now making connections in your dreams with all those different contexts and meanings, and you're forming those multiple representations from your sleep. And actually, it's not just the amount of sleep, it's the quality of sleep, because that process only occurs when you are deeply asleep and dreaming. That's what we do when we dream. We are actually consolidating learning. And in our sleep cycle, which goes up and down about during the night, you know, really it's the deeper part that makes the difference. And there are all sorts of things now that interfere with your sleep. And I'm afraid one of the worst things is this. This bright screen, if you're looking at your email and you're late at night, the bright screen will actually delay melatonin secretion, which disrupts your tendency to go to sleep. But also, if you're reading your email, which I often do, and you're processing that information and you're increasing your load on your brain, that is also going to disrupt your sleep as well. And that's a double effect. So first of all, that means that you're going to be more sleepy the next day because you haven't had so much rest. So that's a bad thing. But the other thing is that you will have forgotten more of what you learned the day before. So it's a real double whammy. It's a double negative. So I can't emphasize enough how important sleep is. And I know, you know, we often don't get enough of it, but you can't be expected to learn if you're not sleeping.
Yeah, and Paul, we have a great question from the great André Hadland from Brazil. Paul, do you think the school day should start a bit later to make sure kids and teens get their full sleep cycle to consolidate memory better? What do you think?
Right. Hello, Andre. Yes. So I think this is a very good question. On the one hand, teenagers' sleep cycle gets delayed during adolescence. So because of the change in hormones, the circadian rhythms change, and actually the relationship between daylight and when you feel sleepy, because that's how your brain knows when to fall asleep, a lag opens up. So teenagers biologically will not want to go to sleep at night, and they will not want to get up in the morning.
Yes.
So the natural solution to this would be start the day at 10 o'clock for teenagers. And there is some evidence to show that does result in them being less sleepy. It's more difficult to find evidence that it actually improves their learning, unfortunately. We're still waiting for that evidence to arrive. And of course, like all of these things, sometimes it's quite difficult, practically speaking, because all the other children are going to be coming in at different hours as well. But I think it is important Sleep hygiene is really important. So I think the more that we can communicate to teenagers, but also parents, and about the importance of getting sleep, the better.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Paul, even the best things have to come to an end. And we are reaching the final moments of our session. So let's move to a final question. And Paul, is there any key messages you would like our teachers to take away about the science of learning? What would you say?
Well, I think possibly one of the most important things is to think about the learning processes, think about what's actually going on in the learner's brain, think about engagement in terms of those deep emotional centers and how that's going to affect things, Think about the building of knowledge. So make sure that information is concise and you're not overloading these working memory networks. And also the unconscious communication, in terms of your emotional responses as well. And then also think about consolidation and think about rehearsal and think about rehearsing that knowledge in as many different contexts as possible and going back all the time in a spiral way to keep reintroducing old material. I think that would be my key messages.
And thank you very, very much. I'd like to thank everyone who was attending this session, and it was a great pleasure to be with you, Paul, to talk about the science of learning. And here we leave your contacts and the awesome cover of your book. And folks, thank you very, very, very much. I can say that it was a dream come true to be at ELTOC together with Paul Howard-Jones. Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. And Carlos?
Yes, thank you. Thank you both, Professor Paul Howard-Jones and Claudia Lopez. That was a lovely, wonderful, and engaging discussion. And I'm sure everybody is really intrigued about the magnificent way our brains work. So, so hopefully everybody had their curiosities somehow satisfied, because we could learn a lot about these very intricate details. So you might want to just stay around until we wrap up for today. But before we do that, let me just ask our lovely audience to share your comments in the chat, and what is the biggest takeaway from you from today. So not only Paul and Claudia's session we have in mind, but if you were lucky to join in early on, we had Chris Farrell and Jenny Dance in the middle session, as well as June Lee and Paul Woodfall from the first session. I'm really curious to find out what was maybe the most interesting thing you learned today, or is there anything you will want to share with your colleagues when you see them next time? It's very interesting. One thing I noticed, though, is Jenny had a lovely range of guitars in the background, and Paul was also referring to a guitar during the speech. And well, you can't see this right now, but I've got the drum kit behind me. So yeah, that's something to tie everything together, just to see how our brains work. By the way, if you would like to refer to Paul's website, I think we have a link for that. And remember that this is also the link to the resource pack, where you will find all the relevant details and websites and links which relate to this session today. So if you go there, you will be able to sign up for the certificate. And yes, as you can see, if you watch the recording, if you're watching the recording actually, as I'm speaking, make sure you sign up for a certificate until the 27th of June. That's 9 a.m. British Summer Time. And you might also want to visit the link for other interesting materials, such as position papers and focus papers and all sorts of other things in the way of our professional development offer, which is quite nice, I would say. Okay, and just before we leave, I would like to draw your attention to what's coming up in Block 2 for ELTOC. So it might be a bit early for the ones who are at this part of the world, 1:45 a.m. British Summer Time. when we will kick off with the next block. And at 2 a.m., we will have online assessment with Mark Richard and Maria Pinatoro, followed by learning through literature. And we'll wrap up with making up for lost learning. So please head over to the link to check out if you can attend. And if not, there will be a recording as well. So hopefully that is something you will be able to refer to later on. And yes, don't worry if you are watching the recording later and you can't really get a certificate later than the 27th of June. I think you can still share this with your colleagues and teachers, and please spread the word. We would like to reach out to each and every student and teacher in the world so that we can actually deliver more professional development content. All right, I think that should bring us to the end of this block. Thank you again to Paul, Claudia, as well as June, Paul and Chris and Jenny, who were with us today, as well as our brilliant moderator team, led by Sean, and all the lovely colleagues we had working in the background with chat box moderating and putting up the links and everything. Well done, team, and thank you everybody for your attention. Thank you for attending. If you like this session, don't forget to hit that like button or maybe that love button. And we are still waiting for comments. If you would like to share with us which was your favorite session today. We would love to hear from you. Okay, that would just leave me enough time to say goodbye again and hope to see you very soon again. Bye.